But we're going to talk now about social media platforms and Bluesky, which has experienced a surge in users over the last few days and since Trump won the election. And I can vouch for that because I joined Bluesky maybe a few weeks ago. Oh, Martha's just joined in the last hour. Have you got any followers yet? Oh, I persuaded you. No, oh, I'll follow you, Martha, definitely, yes. I think I had 17 followers on Bluesky, and suddenly something happened in the last couple of days because I've now got 600 odd. And I don't know how that's happened, but it makes me think that the news stories about people jumping from X over to Bluesky maybe is actually true. But let's find out the truth now because Fevsi Turkalp joins us from gadgetdetective.com. So Fevsi, give us the background. What's led to this Bluesky development?
Bluesky is a social media platform that was designed. It was actually designed by Twitter. I don't know if you're aware, but back in 2019, when Twitter was under the auspices of Jack Dorsey, he was looking for a way of having a more sort of decentralized version of Twitter in the future, one that would give users more control over the information and how it's held and the rules. And they developed that, but in the end, it was spun out in 2021 before Elon Musk had a chance to buy Twitter. And since then, it's been sort of trundling along. It's been invitation only for a while, but then it's been opened up. And there are reports that in the last week or so, they've had about 1.5 million people sign on. And
that's a pretty quick rate, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, that only takes them to about 14.5 million. So, yeah, it's significant. And in a week.
How does that compare, though, with the others?
Twitter is about 17 times the size, roughly speaking. Okay. I mean, it's hard to get accurate figures, obviously, because they're quite well guarded, some of this data. And in terms of people, is it that people have left Twitter to go to Bluesky? And to some extent, yes. There's some suggestion that Twitter have lost about, or X, I should say, have lost about 110,000 people. But there's people who maybe have deleted their accounts on X, and that's the sort of strongest thing you can do. But there's others that have just put them on pause and stopped using them, or largely stopped using them. So those two numbers aren't necessarily incompatible. The extra 1.5 million to Bluesky, and yet only 110,000 lost. So you've probably got about 850,000 to 1350. People who've just sort of switched off from
quite
it.
A lot of people I've read have said, well, I'm going to leave it there sort of dormant and see what happens, but I'm going to be posting on Bluesky or one of the other rivals. I mean, the Guardian made a statement this week saying they were no longer going to put their stuff on Twitter. Yeah. They were going to be using another one. But it must be difficult because at the same time, I mean, even ministers and governments, they want a platform to make their announcements.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing is that, it's very hard to hit that sort of critical mass with the new. And we had all this with Threads, if you remember. Threads, it was.
I remember very well because I joined it with your help live on air.
And they lost, I think within a month, they lost about 82% of those people in terms of active users.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so people went there, and there, but then, on paper, they're 275,000. So they're about half, on paper, they're about half the size of Twitter. And Twitter's not the biggest social media platform, of course. You've got Facebook and so forth. So, it's kind of interesting. I suspect some people are just holding on to their Twitter accounts for now to see what happens. I mean, it could be that at some point, in the foreseeable future, that Musk divests himself of X.
Yes, just remind us of his purchasing of it in the first place, and actually what he's done with it.
Well, he spent $44 billion on it, and that was the offer that he made, and the Twitter board said, yes, please, and then he changed his mind, and then they initiated legal action against him to force him to buy it, and he did eventually buy it at that price. He made big play of the fact that it was going to be, the town square and a free speech platform. But then he made a number of changes that some people didn't like. The first thing he did was he sacked, I think, about 70 to 80% of the staff, including most of the people who were moderating the website. So things were allowed to go unchallenged that previously would have been picked up. He also allowed back a number of extreme figures who had been barred from the platform, and they were allowed back. Again, they were allowed to work with impunity. And I did some research on this myself. I was, from time to time, I would report tweets and individuals on that platform for breaches of what I thought were breaches. And my understanding of the rules was such that I'd get a hit rate of about 95% in terms of those people being sanctioned in some way. After Elon Musk took over, my hit rate is fallen to about 5%.
So he would say that's free speech, that he thinks it's the world's town square and you should be able to say what you want. I mean, why were you trying to get those stopped? Because presumably he would think, well, it's just because you disagreed with them.
Well, no, that's fine, but then he didn't change the rules. Well, he made one or two changes to the rules, but it was more to do with how the rules were being applied. And there were some things that were truly disgusting. I mean, don't forget, one of the other things that happened was that advertisers boycotted him, or at least pulled away from him. And he famously told them to do one. What seems to have happened now is that people can say the absolute most hateful things you can imagine, and then you get a message back in a couple of weeks' time saying this doesn't break our rules, and yet the rules are the rules are still there about hateful conduct and so forth. They're just not applying them in the same way. And I think some things were so extreme, and I was quite careful not to report anything that I thought was in any way borderline, just the things that were really disgusting, and yet most of those still stand.
And the other thing that I've noticed as a user is what you see now seems to have been changed. Is that to do with algorithms?
Yeah.
Are they engineering it in some way? Because I seem to be seeing all sorts of things that I wasn't seeing before and not seeing other things.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's changed. I mean, Elon Musk has always been a high-profile figure, but what he's done, which Jack Dorsey didn't do, is make it his personal plaything. In a sense, he elevated himself in the algorithm, so you can't help but encounter him, whereas you rarely encountered Jack Dorsey, for example. He, there are those that say that he has used it to promulgate disinformation, and some of it even actionable. There was a suggestion at one point that he was getting investigated for inciting attacks. He made some comment about how is it that only Trump is being targeted for assassination attempts and not people on the left, and it was almost like an invitation to do so. I think it was the FBI issued a statement saying they're aware of the statement, and the implication was that they're investigating it. I dare say that's not going to happen now. He's used it in such a way, the algorithm seems to have been tweaked to provide more propaganda, more hateful speech. I mean, it depends on your politics, and I would also say that for every 100,000 that leave Twitter, we don't know how many that are joining. So it might just be that it's politically shifting rather than numbers.
Is there a danger that it becomes just part of the thing that we have, the problem we have with social media is that it becomes an echo chamber, and we'll end up with you pick the social media that you like, that gives you the messages that you want to read and not the other ones. And likewise, Bluesky might end up as the more liberal leaning or and have different opinions, and people will just pick what they want to read, and just like they do newspapers, I suppose.
Yeah. So we've always been victims of our own confirmation bias, the phenomenon whereby we tend to accept information that comports with what we already believe, and we reject information that disagrees with what we already believe, even if that information is well sourced. And we all suffer from that, and to an extent, Twitter, or X as it is now, has always been an echo chamber, because that's what the algorithm does. It's told to maximize engagement, and people engage most when they get information that agrees with what they already believe. So there has always been that, but I think there's a couple of differences now. First of all, there is things being published on that platform which by any normal standard would be considered to be not only against the rules but possibly unlawful in many jurisdictions. And so I think that's a measurable difference. It's not just left versus right. The amount of hate speech on that platform, I mean, it's become a cesspool, frankly. And that's me just trying to leave my own sort of political views to one side, but I just see things that I think are illegal on there, and you know that I think that's the difference, and although and that would only increase now, because if there is this exodus away from people who find that disgusting, then what we're doing is concentrating people of other views who find, you see, the thing is, it's not that the algorithms are evil, or even that the people that set them up are necessarily evil. It is that the algorithms were given the job of maximizing profitability and therefore engagement, because the more time a person spends on it, the more they engage. And the things that promote engagement are greed and hate and fear. Yeah, it's not puppy dog's tails. And because of that, the algorithms are just feeding people more and more of that. And unfortunately, we see the results of that. I think the final straw for a lot of people was the rather brazen way in which Twitter, or X, was turned into a tool to promote a particular candidate for the presidential election in the United States. And it was so, brazen. In fact, I think Elon Musk was quoted as saying that if Trump doesn't win, he's going to jail. I mean, I doubt he would have gone to jail, but I suspect he would have lost a lot of his government contracts.
So do you think that buying something like one of these social media platforms is the sort of modern day equivalent of people buying political power by buying up newspapers?
Yeah.
It's about the power that you can wield.
Yeah, I very much do. And I don't even know that was the plan. It may have been, but I don't know if that was a plan. I mean, and I've never met Elon Musk, but he strikes me as being an opportunist. And therefore, because he looked at ways, how could he monetize this? How could he get his money back? He leveraged a lot of money. He took a lot of money out of Tesla shares, and he needed to find a way to monetize it. And I think he's found it.
And he has been given this position in Trump's setup, dealing with what was called government waste and efficiency. Do you think that, I mean, there are people now questioning this and saying that he would stand to gain in some way, that there's a kind of a reward for all of his support for Trump. I mean, from a tech point of view, do you think there's stuff that he would get from the government?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if it's from a particularly tech point of view, but I mean, for example, Mr. Trump has been talking a lot about tariffs, including on electric vehicles. So he may have influence over what form those tariffs take, and hopefully for him in a way that is good for his business. Do you see what I mean? Because
absolutely.
if there are tariffs on cars coming in, but it then depends on whether those countries retaliate and what his market share is in those countries. So I think he's in a position to influence. And I think, I think a lot of people say about Trump that he's quite transactional. And I suspect that Elon Musk may be as well. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a quid pro quo. People don't invest the sort of money that he did, and there was all the shenanigans about how he used Starlinks at the voting centres and all of this. I mean, I don't suppose any of this is going to come to light anytime soon, but eventually I think things will come to light to show that he went above and beyond for for Trump, and he's going to expect that reward. What I would say to you is, looking at the history of Donald Trump as president and how many people that he worked with that he's still able to work with is very few. The number, I think, over 40 came out against him during the presidential campaign. And looking at Trump's history and looking at Musk's history of being able to work with people, Musk has been either left or forced out of several organizations that he helped found, not least OpenAI, and he's now working on a competitor. I do find it hard to believe that those two egos can stay in lockstep indefinitely.
Fevsi, thank you very much indeed. Fevsi Turkalp from gadgetdetective.com. Thank you for joining us. More coming up in a moment.